This video I'm going to talk about the differences between a wide-angle picture like this and a telephoto picture like this. When it comes down to it, as you change your focal length, you're going to have a variety of things that will be different between one or the other. For wide angle, you're going to notice there's a much longer depth of field, an increased angle of view, which means that you're going to see more of the scene. In addition to that, something called exaggerated proportions. For telephoto, so once you go past 50 millimeters and higher, you're going to notice that you have a shorter depth of field, a narrower angle of view, which means that things are closer up, more zoomed in, and a compressed space, so the background looks closer to whatever it is you're photographing. Here's a quick example showing a change in focal length. As you'll notice, the numbers get higher and higher, and as they do, you see those direct effects happening in each picture. Gold remained the same in each of the images, but as the focal length changed, I backed up and I took another picture, I backed up and I took another picture. So that way you could see the differences in how the background appears, both with the depth of field, but also with compressed space. Let's take a look at this in camera, so you can see the direct impact of focal length on how pictures look. I'm here in Taylors Falls, Minnesota to tell you a little bit about focal length. So focal length is the lens zoom that we're using on the camera, and it's important for us to realize, besides just making a photo look more zoomed in, how focal length can really impact your picture. The optics of the lens change some effects in the photos the more that you zoom in or the more wide you go on your pictures. So first let's talk about wide angle. So this is a wide angle picture right here. I'm going to be taking some pictures here that I keep the settings the same in each of the shots. So I'm just going to choose a little bit lower f number and kind of fast enough shutter speed to avoid camera shake and a low ISO. So here's our first shot, and I'm just going to get a picture kind of off into the distance here, focusing on that water off into the distance. So things that you'll notice about this picture, we've got wide angle, so we're seeing a lot of the scene. We're able to create a longer depth of field, which means that more of the scene is in focus, and that's more and more the case the wider that you get a much longer depth of field. I'll just do a few more wide angle shots here. Right? Maybe I want even off this direction too. Right? So wide angle gives you a long depth of field. The side effect though of a wide angle is that you start to distort things. So let me give you an example here. Here's my phone just off to the distance here. Kind of put that into the side of the frame, and all of a sudden it starts to look real stretched out. Okay? The more that something is wide and also kind of off to the corners of the frame, the more stretched that they're going to get. Right? So if I had an even wider lens on, this one just goes down to 28, I would be able to distort things even more. So that's a real important thing to say too. The lower the number, the wider angle that you'll get. Okay? The higher the number, the more zoomed in that it is, and it just becomes more telephoto. All right, so let's talk about our next thing here. As I start to zoom in, we're going to start to see the opposite effects happen in our photos. I do need to adjust for the light here just a little bit. So it's awfully bright off in the background there now. So I might actually just kind of zoom right in the back there. So this is at 35 millimeters. This is at 50, and this is at 75. So not that you'll be able to tell too much here of difference other than just zooming in, but there are some real changes that start to happen in the pictures. So for telephoto, the more you zoom in, the less that you'll see of your scene, the shorter the depth of field, so the more you can blur the background. Here's an example of that right here. So take a look at the background blur going on in the background of that image. I'm going to adjust for light just a little bit here and redo that shot. Okay, so the more that you can create a short depth of field, and also the more that you can do something called compressed space, which means that you make the background look closer to your subject. So that's something that is pretty unique to telephoto as well. So let me switch my lens here, and then I'll be able to even see it more. So I've just put a lens on the camera here that is 135 millimeters. So the last lens I had on there stopped at 70. As I take a picture right now with this lens, get a focus in here, you're really going to start to see a lot more of that background blur going on. And in addition to that, let me just get a good focus again here. In addition to that, the background looks a lot closer. So that water in the background and that cliff off into the distance, okay, all that looks a lot closer into our subject, just because we've been able to zoom in with the telephoto lens. So that's just it in a nutshell. Remember, wide is good for larger scenes, things that you really want to capture, an entire scene. Telephoto is great to isolate your subject, kind of get in, notice smaller details, or even for portraits. Telephoto is definitely the way to go.